Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the regular meeting of the Board of Supervisors of King George County today. To start off, Mr. Collins.
So please stand and bow your heads in prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for the blessings that you bestow us. Thank you for our military, both present serving and also those who have served. Thank you for our fire and rescue who keep us safe. Thank you for our sheriff's office and state police for keeping us safe. And Lord, please, a special prayer for those who are working every day during this time of COVID to help us have our daily lives as normal as possible. As we stand in front of you, this board, give us grace to make the best decisions for the county. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Miller, do we have any amendments?
No, sir.
Okay. With no amendments to the agenda, I'm going to open the floor up for public comment. Comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person in order to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, we ask that you offer those comments at the time of the public hearing. Anyone here for public comment? And if you could please state your name and address, Mr. Veazey.
Warren Veazey, 8229 Lighthouse Lane. I would like to throw my support in for a item on the agenda, the acquisition of the Lake Caledon property. But I also would like you all to consider adding to writing a letter of support to Delegate Torian's study bill for the Dogger Road Heritage Trail to look at adding it to the state park system. As an insight to the number of trail users, we've had since November of 2020, 2,700 new permits issued online. And a large proportion of the people I see out there think it's already a state park and don't even have a permit. We currently have 4 races on the trail. This year we should have over 1,000 runners combined, aiding the county's tourism. During last month's snowstorm, the trail suffered major tree damage, and we put out a call for volunteers to help clear the trail. And over 2 weeks, we had over 300 hours, I estimate, of volunteer hours to chainsaw and open the trail up for the 2 races we have coming up this month and next. And that shows you our local support base in the county. Over the past 16 years, the trail has operated successfully as a private trail with free use in the belief that it would make a valuable addition to the state park system. So please support this goal by passing a resolution of support both for the acquisition of Caledon, but also asking Mr. Turian to, at the end of his study this October, which is this year's budget cycle, to also put in $600,000 to acquire the dirt trails as well. These efforts will cost no county funds because this is all done by state and REPI money. And there would be no Stowe County maintenance either because it would become part of the state park. The only thing you're losing is for the DRHT portion of the trail, $840 a year in property taxes, which will be more than made up for in revenue from visitors coming to spend money here. So thank you, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Veazey. Anyone else?
The county, it reads, transitioning rural county, steeped in history, a high priority on quality of life, and a regional leader in proactive and progressive planning. And I think that when you read that, I think that who would not agree with that? Everyone, I think, agrees with that right on the county website. Also captured in this deep history is actually, it's interesting, there's a lot of history with George Washington. If you read anything on George Washington in his youth, you will see him talking about walking around the county, particularly in the area from Caledon to the Chotank, where he spent a lot of his youth. There's several instances there. Matter of fact, the only reference to George Washington youth other than from him was a letter written by a friend of his in this area that talked about walking from here to Fredericksburg. And he was recanting back when Washington was a general later and was reminding him of this. King George County, if you look on here, the reason they changed the length and the squared it up so it was a day's walk from anywhere in the county to the county center. That's behind it. And most interesting is in Last Will of Washington, written in 1799, he reflects back to his youth about being here and walking here. I'll read that portion. To the acquaintances and friends of my juvenile years, Lawrence Washington and Robert Washington of the Chotank, I give my other 2 gold-headed canes, so they could walk, having my arms engraved on them, and to each, as they will each be useful where they live, I leave one of my spyglasses, which constituted part of my equipage during the late war. When you talk tonight, and you talk about the heritage here, look not only at this, at Lake Caledon, but look at the DRHT. Okay, that's been studied. It's been around in 15 years. We're always on the edge of it. It ties into our history of walking. Washington would agree that this is part of the county because that's what they did. They walked. So seize that moment. When you support this, mention your support for a turnkey project, I might add. Doesn't require a lot of expenses. It is ready for you to turn it over to the state. And when you look back at proactive and progressive planning, that is exactly what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Seeing none, Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online? Thank you. Members, anybody get any correspondence from people?
I do, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Skupka, go ahead.
So one of them I printed out to each of my colleagues. I received it around 3:30 this afternoon and was upstairs in a meeting. So I did not forward it, but I did print it out and provide the cover letter to each of you. The other one, we all were copied on, I believe, from Mr. Dave Jones. He states, I am unable to attend tonight's meeting, but I do want to express my support for the acquisition of Lake Caledon and the Dahlgren Railroad Heritage Trail and making them part of Caledon State Park. The importance of free public recreational facilities cannot be overstated. Then the second item is an attachment to an email I received from Jim Lynch around the same time this afternoon of the Potomac Heritage Trail Association, dated today. To King George Board of Supervisors, dear members of the board, as a member of the board of the Potomac Heritage Trail Association, I'm writing to encourage you to approve a letter of support for the acquisition of the property known as Lake Caledon. As an addition to Caledon State Park, Senator Richard Stewart has introduced a budget amendment for the acquisition. Senate Bill 30, Item C-49.10, number 2S. As you know, the property is bisected by the Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trails local segment, the Dahlgren Railroad Heritage Trail. This addition has the potential of offering many advantages to the trail users. How the property is developed will be decided in a revision to the Caledon Master Plan and subsequent approvals by the General Assembly. Among the features that we will encourage are trail user amenities such as camping, potable water, and restrooms. Right now, our campers have only a very rough, unimproved campsite, essentially a patch of bare ground. Even so, it's very popular with scout groups. Campers have to arrange for a porta-john and bring in their own water supply. Parking for this section of the PHNST/DRHT is very limited. Our trail users would benefit from having a larger parking facility for trail access. Connecting trail to main Caledon. A few years ago, the Friends of Caledon built a new trailhead with a small parking area on Caledon Road near the intersection with Indian Town Road. This was in anticipation of a connecting trail across the Lake Caledon property as provided for by the HOA agreement for the then planned development. Right now, the only way to traverse between this trailhead and the PHNST/DRHT is via roads with no safety improvements for bike/ped travel. Having a connecting off-road path is much preferred for both safety as well as aesthetic reasons. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Kupka. If there's nothing else for comment, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
Did you want to do the reports from members of the board first?
Oh, I skipped over that. Thank you. Yes, reports and members of the board. I'm sorry, Mrs. Bender.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank everyone who came out in support of Saving Lake Caledon and also the Dahlgren Heritage Trail. Thank you very much for coming out and talking to us about it and introducing me some little history I didn't even know about. It's always great to learn new things. For my report, I'll be very brief. I attended the Dahlgren Heritage Museum. They're moving forward with their strategic plan and action plan, and I just want to give a shout out that they've done a lot of hard work to try to bring a museum into the 21st century and make it viable for the whole community and to help promote STEM education for our youth. I also attended the Healthy Generations Board, where I was nominated and accepted to be chair. And they do good work for our seniors. And I have talked to them maybe possibly about, and I'll bring this up again during update. We still have it on here, I think, the winter storm update, about helping out maybe seniors and making a call center for our seniors that volunteer their information. They like the idea also, maybe bring it to their board also next meeting. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Granger.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you to Mr. Veazey and Mr. Buckley. Thank you for coming out and providing your comments on your support for the acquisition of Caledon and the DHRT into the state park system, as well as to Mr. Jones and Mr. Lynch for providing their comment by writing or email. So other than that, I did attend on the Wednesday 26th, the joint TAC meeting. So I'd just like to say thank you to those members who serve on the TAC Tourism Advisory Committee for the service to the community and meeting with us to discuss. And the last thing I have is Mr. Alan Parker has been serving as the Parks and Recreation Committee appointee for the James Madison District, and his term comes up on February 28th of this month. And so I spoke with him and he is amenable to continue to serve. So I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Mr. Alan Parker to the Parks and Recreation Committee starting March 1st, 2022.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, chair votes aye. Mr.
That concludes my report. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Kupka.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Mr. Veazey and Mr. Buckley for coming out and providing their public comment. And thank you to those who sent emails as well. On Monday, January 24th, I attended the GWRC meeting. The regional resilience plan was tabled once again, and I do not have confidence that the regional plan will be adopted. We need to adopt a local resilience plan in order to apply for community flood preparedness funds. So I am requesting consensus of the board to direct staff to develop a local resilience plan so we can apply for grant funding. And the idea is that we can use the draft regional plan that an outside consultant firm has already put time and work in, and we can modify it to tailor it to make it more specific to our needs for King George County. So I don't think it would be a terribly heavy lift for staff. I know Ms. Binder serves on GWRC with me. She has seen the plan as well. And some concerns have been identified by a number of localities with regard to some of the content. And if those things were concerning, they could be cropped out and still meet the needs, because you have to have a plan to be able to apply for the grant funding.
I'm amenable to that. I'll leave it to my colleagues to decide as well.
Mr. Collins? Okay. I think we're all in.
Are you making is there a motion? I mean, I don't know that you need to do that. We can take care of that, but
I was just
didn't know if we were waiting on somebody to make a motion.
No, I'm just saying, you just go ahead and get staff working on that and get with Mrs. Cupcake about getting, if you don't have one, a copy of this, of the regional one. And then we can, as she said, we can just modify, cut and paste and go from there.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, because the deadline to apply for the grant fund is April 8th. So it is time sensitive. We would have to adopt our plan on the local level and submit it to one of, I can't remember, they're all alphabet, state regulatory agencies to get their approval to be able to use that plan for our grant application. So there are a few more hoops to jump through, but thank you very much. Thursday, January 27th, I attended the Rappahannock Area Regional Jail Board of Directors meeting. There will be a budget impact on each locality as the jail board endeavors to recruit and retain staff, much as we did when we prioritized our own public safety last year, and working to address significant capital project expenses to maintain a now 20-year-old building. So I just wanted to put that on everyone's radar so it's not a surprise at budget time. Why didn't anybody tell us the jail is going to need, an increase? It's going to apply across the board to all of the localities. And I'm sure we'll have some more information on that going forward. I attended the redistricting workshop on Thursday, January 27th, and I want to thank staff for hosting it, and thank you to the citizens who attended. I did notice when we formally appointed our redistricting committee members last month, one of our members was left off the list inadvertently. And so I would like to move to appoint Mr. Louis Pancotti to the redistricting committee.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank you all very much for your consideration on that. And we will hold the public hearing on the redistricting ordinance and the new proposed maps and at least one proposed change in a polling place at our February 15th regularly scheduled meeting, and that is already out for advertisement. I want to thank Mr. Chris Clark, Director of Parks and Recreation. Tourist-oriented directional signage has already started appearing in our community pursuant to the board's wishes. The Sealston signs have been installed this week. So it's a great initiative, a reinvestment of our tourism dollars to promote locations of our parks, particularly the ones that have sports amenities, because we have discussed at great length the sports tourism opportunities that we could be taking better advantage of. So thank you, Mr. Clark, for that. I want to recognize one of our firefighters. It was brought to my attention today by Chief Moody, and this was posted publicly so I can share it. Lieutenant Matt Russell, one of our EMS supervisors and critical care paramedics, was first on scene to an unknown type of medical emergency at the Sealston Deli on Route 3. At approximately 10 p.m. on January 22nd, as he approached the car, he found a woman in the process of giving birth. After he went back to his vehicle to get more equipment, he came back to perform an assessment and found that the baby's delivery was in breech position and only a foot was sticking out. Due to the premature state of the baby, Lieutenant Russell was able to maneuver and turn the baby in order to get a traditional birth position. In the short term, the new mom and baby and husband driving are all doing well. Congratulations to Lieutenant Matthew Russell for a job well done, and Chief Moody will be presenting him a certificate and a stork pin at his next staff meeting. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. And then one last item, a volunteer opportunity. King George Little League will host a field maintenance day on Saturday, March 5th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at King George Middle School and Barnes Field Parks Diamonds. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Kupka. Mr. Collins.
Good evening, thank you. Was it a boy or girl?
Maybe he can answer that information.
Congratulations to the new parents, Lieutenant. Thank you, Mr. Veazey, for coming out. You've been a staunch supporter of the Caledon expansion for many, many years. You've definitely worked extremely hard. I've seen you at every single event pushing for that. And Mr. Buckley, it's good to see you again, and your wife. She's hiding around the corner there. The way I understood the Senate bill was for the Heritage Trail was it was a study, not an acquisition. So I just want to make sure that was clear. But you know, Caledon with the developer already has plans for 96 homes there. So if we can take the rooftops out and have some more parkland would be wonderful, especially on 218 where the traffic's already pretty tough there. I had opportunity to go to the TAC with my fellow members. We had a good discussion on the future of the county and ways to attract tourism and to stay with our comprehensive plan. And the last thing is that I didn't know about a sewage discharge into the newspaper until I read it in the newspaper. Apparently that was over 5 days past the time it was discharged. And as the James Monroe representative, I would have liked to known that occurred when the time it occurred. I've also been listening to the Service Authority meetings. They seem to have a lot of closed meetings in the Service Authority. I think it's important that the public business be brought to the public, not in so much closed sessions. I listened to the exemptions and I spoke with the county attorney in regards to that. So I'm a little disappointed that the public's not being kept aware of what's going on in the Service Authority, and neither am I as the representative. That concludes my public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Veazey, Mr. Buckley, thank you so much for coming out. Hopefully we can get Richmond to get on board and with us with that project and, you know, get Mr. Stewart to push it on through, and hopefully the study that Torian's going to do will, you know, will lead us into another letter after they get that taken care of, hopefully support here for the board as well. So, and thank you, Mr. Lynch and Mr. Jones, for your emails as well. On the 26th, I also attended the joint workshop with TAC to review our tourism strategic plan. And hopefully we can get that plan up and operational and get some much needed tourism and attraction here to King George. Thursday, I went out and went to the redistricting also as well with some of other my colleagues. It was pretty quiet. It wasn't very widely attended. So I know at the next election, there'll be folks saying, hey, where do we need to vote? So hopefully they can find that all out on their maps and where they're going to do. And I know the registrar is going to be sending out new voter registration cards for everybody as well. So the districts. And that's all I have for my report. So now we can move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
I move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. County official reports. Sheriff Giles, you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'd like to, before I get into my report, maybe request a moment of silence for the two officers that were killed out in Bridgewater campus. The campus police officer was actually a King George deputy just prior to me becoming a deputy. So we kind of have a tie there in the campus safety officer. So if I have that permission, I'd like to moment of silence for those officers.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving right along, I'd like to take this time in my constitutional officer report to request the appointment of Virginia State Police First Sergeant Davenport to our tow board that we have. Ms. Lackey actually has that letter, I think, requesting that.
So there's been a change in command staff, so there's a request to make a change to the appointment.
So I'll go ahead and move if that's what's needed here. I move to appoint First Sergeant Dylan Davenport of Virginia State Police to the King George County Tow Board.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes.
Thank you. I do have another report that I'd like to bring in front of the board if Ms. Hart could come forward. Today, Deputy Simon and Ms. Hart's employee Deanna went to do some checking of the stores for the cigarette tax. They were only able to check 8 out of the 24 stores. I'm sorry, yeah, 8 out of the 24 stores that we have, and that was all in Dahlgren. 5 of those stores were in compliance with the ordinance. 3 were not. The border store, Deanna and Deputy Simon seized 13 cases of untaxed cigarettes. When asked why, the owner stated that the father owns the store and they just didn't have time to take care of that business. And he also made a comment that had he known that we were going to make that check, he'd have thrown them in the dumpster and burned them. So Deputy Simon issued 2 summonses to each employee that was there, because the way the ordinance is written, that anybody that is there selling the product gets the summonses. So, and the violation there was in violation of the county ordinance for selling untaxed, or at least having untaxed cigarettes on the premises. They moved to Fastmart, where they seized 20 cases of untaxed cigarettes. They said they just hadn't had the time to send them back to the distributor. 1 summons was issued there to the employee that was selling it. Murphy's, they seized 1 case, and the distributor would not take those cases back. They were advised 6 to 8 months ago when we did our initial inspection of the stores that if the distributor won't take them back, to come see Ms. Hart in her office, and we would sell them the tax stamp. So another summons was issued there for violation of the ordinance. So just give you a kind of an overview. Each case, and this is an approximation because it was a variety that they kind of put together, there is between 25 and 30 cartons per case. And it's approximated that it's about $1,000 per case. So if you do the math, it was roughly $34,000 worth of cigarettes that they seized to date just in those 3 stores. Once the inventory is done of all those cigarettes, so we can push forward, then Deanna and Deputy Simon will go out and finish off the rest of the stores and see what we can bring in from there. So I just want to bring that to the board's attention, that we are still actively working those stores. And we can take any questions that you may have right now.
Good job, Mr. Chair. Sorry. Good job on the getting those folks that are not in compliance, and I'm sure that how many you say there are? 24 stores. I'm sure the other ones will be in compliance probably today.
Quickly.
Yeah.
One of our ladies that work here in the building was at the Fast Mart up here at the middle school. The Fast Mart in Dahlgren had called the them there to let them know, hey, they're checking. So that's how it's done. They call store to store.
Can I ask, go, sorry. Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? So I realize the ordinance took effect July 1st, and I believe we had there was like a 90-day grace period where there wouldn't be enforcement because we knew that there would be some education, so to speak, and some ramp up time. How many times has staff actually gone out and conducted enforcement activities since that ramp up time expired?
The first time we went out with Ms. Hart and Deanna and Deputy Simon, and it was basically, hey, you're not in compliance, get in compliance. And we're coming back. And that was September.
August, September, I don't know, I have the date in the office. I can get that for you. If
So
you need.
it's been one time with the warnings, and then we went back today with the enforcement.
So will there be going forward a regular, I don't know, and I'm not by any means trying to tell anyone how to do their job, but is there going to be an intention to do like a monthly or a more regular enforcement checks so that we can make sure these businesses are actually complying with the ordinance and buying the tax stamps, because that's what we want them to do, because that's what generates us the revenue?
Sure,
Okay, all right.
And just for the record, or to say that these were found in the back rooms, they weren't on display for sale. They were in the storage areas. Now, whether they were selling them out of the storage areas, we don't know, but that's where they were found.
Thank you very much. And thanks for all you all are doing to facilitate that.
Mr. Granger?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Did any of the facilities have cigarettes that were actually stamped? Did they all actually have? So some were and some were not.
Yes.
Okay. Track it.
And essentially what they probably were the untaxed ones that we found to begin with. They just put them in the back room and left them.
Okay.
But they were also told that they could come and get the stamps. So their distributors is getting the stamps, and they're selling the taxed cigarettes, but these ones in the back, which are still a violation.
Understood.
And those are ones that they had before they had to purchase stamps.
Tracking. Okay. Yes. Okay. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I was going to say thank you both for getting after that. Sheriff Giles, just for the rest of the board and the public, can you explain what happens to those cigarettes now and where that kind of goes?
It can kind of go several ways. I mean, it depends on what the court makes their decision once it's been adjudicated, but if it goes the way we'd like it to go, we'd be able to put them up for auction and sell them out. But the businesses can also buy them back and tax them, put their stamp on it. So either way, it's revenue for them.
Yeah, I think we have to stamp them in order to sell
Right.
them. We have to put
Right.
the stamp.
We can't just give them back.
Yeah, so will we need volunteers?
And then all the cigarettes that were like in the racks and stuff that they came across, those were all properly stamped. These are just the stuff in the back. And I knew that, they had that option to send them back to the distributor to get new stamps, or they could do them with your stamps.
First,
Yes.
and I apologize for the interruption, but they were sent they were told by Deanna, Ms. Hart, and Deputy Simon. They were verbally told that, and then also sent a letter from the Commissioner of Revenue on the proper way to make sure that it's not a violation.
And some of them did come in and purchase their own stamps and put them on there. And I think some of them did send them back, but some of them said they can't send them back.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. That was great. Sheriff Giles, one more thing. Did you say the officer at Bridgewater was one of our deputies?
Back 29 years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Way before you.
Thank you. Moving on, Mrs. Hart.
Yes, and sticking with the cigarette tax, to date, our sales are $1,491,111.40 in sales of cigarette. And she's gotten some orders today, but she was out gathering up cigarettes, so we haven't, that's not on my figure.
Gee, that's surprising.
I know. I'm sorry I missed it, but
So that total was from January 1?
that's from day one.
Oh,
And
or
I'm
day
gonna
1.
just continuing a running total. That's from July 1st. Well, when they started buying them.
And again, that number again was what?
$1,491,111.40.
Thank you.
Welcome. I'm recommending the Board of Supervisors authorize the county administrator to transfer $5,818 from the general fund balance to the reassessment budget to provide funding for the Board of Equalization and the secretarial positions. The Board of Equalization will hold meetings for taxpayers to review the recent reassessments on 12 days at a cost of $431 per day for a total of $5,172. Additionally, there is a one-day training of all of the board members and the 2 secretaries at the cost of $646. Total funding needed for training and meetings, $5,818. And we have 10 dates that I have scheduled folks to come in. And when I'm done scheduling, I will have 97 appointments. We're going to be busy. Our meetings start this Thursday. We have a few at night, 4, I believe, for nighttime. They are all booked. We have some openings for the day. I may have to add one more evening appointment, but I'm not sure at this point. But right now they're full. So.
Any questions for Mrs. Hart?
I have a question, quick question. How long are your meetings from? Is it from early in the morning to a certain time in the evening?
Start at 9. The day appointments, they start at 9, and I'm going to end up around 12:30ish to give the board time to discuss. Usually went to 1 if the board needs to discuss and make any decisions. They don't decide when the taxpayer's right there. They have 15 minutes to, so to speak, prove their evidence of why things are high on their property. And then the board will discuss it. And then we send a letter letting them know it went up, it went down, or stayed the same.
Thank you. You have a busy day.
A little bit. We're getting it.
I just had a couple questions. So everybody's been appointed and everybody's been trained.
Yeah.
Everyone's good to go and ready to go.
They've been sworn in. They're all ready to go.
Are you all still taking appointments from the public?
Yeah.
Is there a cutoff date on that?
We have through the 31st of March, but essentially the board will meet for an entire year. So, I will take appointments after that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
No other questions from anybody for Mrs. Hart? Do we have a motion?
I move to authorize the county administrator to transfer $5,818 from the general fund balance to the reassessment budget to provide funding for the Board of Equalization and the secretarial position.
Second.
We have a motion properly second. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Mrs. Hart.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Moving on, report from the county attorney.
Just a brief report. On Friday is the last date for any proposals for the Confederate monument. And after that date, we will, staff will bring forward any proposals that are received so that the board can consider what action to take in moving the monument. And I have advertised a listing for an assistant county attorney. The post is going to be open for about a month. So look forward to seeing what applicants we get.
You said that was Friday, that was the last day for that?
Yes.
Friday, okay. Any questions for Mrs. Lackey? No? Thank you. Moving on to 202, Board Commission Agency Reports, Public Hearings. Come right up. Thank you for coming out for him.
Oh, yeah. So I'm just reading the monthly receipts and expenditures for the month of December. Beginning balance, 26,308,748.25. The receipts were 30,980,872.34. Disbursements were 26,144,678.63, making the ending balance 31,144,941.96.
Thank you. Any questions? None? Mr. Miller, could you just make sure that those get recorded into our minutes, please?
Yes, sir. And I believe all the supervisors received this information as well. It was sent via Mr. Mr. Randy. Yes. Yes. Okay. I just want to make sure.
All right. Thank you. Moving on, presentations and reports. Winter Storm Frida response recovery update by Mr. Miller, Sheriff Giles, and Chief Moody.
If I could just, I'll be very brief. I just think we wanted to get back with you. I know that, we're a month, basically almost after this, and I don't want it to fade from memory. This is a lot about some of the things that we talked about that we're going to change. Excuse me, but it's also just really to call attention for your benefit of some of the actions of our employees. And, I will say this, that it's just not fire and rescue. Mr. Clark, Mr. Franklin from DSS, they were pulled out of I guess it was a cold house, so maybe they weren't too upset about it, but they were brought to the Citizen Center to basically man that and to coordinate the staffing of that. So what we're wanting to do is just really call attention to the kind of service that this county receives from all the people, and it goes across the board to the general properties employees who are out well before the storm even hits doing things, to our service authority individuals that are out making sure that there's water service and that the water or the wastewater plants work, to Amanda Smil, our HR director, Donna Hahn, our finance director. I could go on, and I'm not here to necessarily do that. I want to not take away from the report that Chief Moody has and also Sheriff Giles. So, but I think that these folks and all your employees deserve a very big pat on the back for the kind of service that they demonstrated and showed the entire time. So, Chief.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Just wanted to go over a quick presentation we put together about our response to the winter storm event. So this is a graphic from the Weather Service. You can see it Sunday morning, about 6:30. This was one of the first forecasts, and it had King George here in the 1 to 4, 1 to 6 inch range. That afternoon, around 2:30, the Weather Service updated their map, and you can see that the 5 to 8 range expanded quite largely up 95 corridor. And it wasn't the narrow band that we saw earlier. It was a much widespread area of the accumulating heavy snow. Monday morning, the map showed this. now I had the 8 to 12 inch band. And definitely King George, Caroline, Spotsylvania, Stafford County were in that heavy band of snow that they were forecasting that morning on the 3rd. This map is from a website that tracks power outages. And we use this, not only do we use Dominion's website, Northern Next website, but we also, I like to look at this website because it tracks power outages throughout the state and shows, the greatest impacts that you see throughout the Commonwealth. This screenshot was morning of the 3rd at 11:26, and it showed King George has about 12,000 accounts between Dominion and Northern Neck. At this point in the morning, it showed almost 5,400 accounts without power in our county between Dominion and Northern Neck. And that was about 45% of our community already had lost power by that time in the morning. Okay, Chris, next slide. Okay. And you can see the colors on it. Obviously, the darker colors are the more of the percentage of the total locality without power. This is another copy of that map without the highlights on it, so you can see the impact. And this was Monday afternoon. The red, the oranges of the greatest percentage of the customers in that locality that had lost power. Next slide. This is a screenshot again in the afternoon of the 3rd. Now our outages are up over 7,000. So we were over 58% or so of our customers in King George County had lost power by early afternoon on the 3rd. So definitely shows you the impact. And those numbers fluctuated as accounts were restored, saw more outages. So this was a historic event. The heavy snow, the rapid accumulation, all that came together quickly. This is a map the Weather Service put out after the event where they took the totals throughout the Commonwealth and put it on a map. And you can see, and I've got a zoomed up version here on the next slide, but the heaviest areas, the most accumulated snow was in our region, the Fredericksburg region. This is another map put out by our local Weather Service office in DC. And you can see we had snowfall amounts foot plus throughout the county, and look into in Stafford and Spotsylvania. That was definitely the bullseye of this event. Some of our challenges that we faced, obviously the heavy snow with rapid accumulations quickly caused problems on the roads, downed trees, power outages, and obviously the prolonged periods of cold temperatures. Citizens that lost power, it just made the conditions worse as they were trying to stay in their homes or heat their homes in the extreme weather. The extensive power outages we mentioned, roads were blocked by trees. Every call that we ran, sure the sheriff's office ran, that we had to cut our way to the calls, and that delayed response, and we had to send more units in order to reach those calls. Obviously, difficulty reaching patients, from dispatch to getting into their house. A lot of times we had to bring in a four-wheel drive to bring that patient out to where we could, on a road, to meet the ambulance and transport them to the hospital. We even experienced difficulty transporting the patients to the hospital. We had to send our snowplow truck right there to the hospital to plow a path for one of our ambulances to get to the hospital. Then we dealt with the issues on 95 when they shut down Interstate 95. The traffic was rerouted onto 301, and so we definitely saw more traffic in King George on 301 and Route 3 because of the spillover from 95. And then you still had poor road conditions, power outages, so it just created much more of a problem for citizens to get around, and also for the traffic to pass through. And then it impacted our response too, because of a slowed response because of the traffic. And the power utilities, they saw some of that issue too, with just getting their trucks to where they needed to work because of the traffic. And during all this time, we were experiencing a COVID surge, which impacted our department. So we had less people available, and we were managing all these separate incidents. Then later in the event, we had to assist Presidential Lakes with the concern of their dam, and it was just another event that we had to manage in our emergency operations center. So all the team came together with that, not only with the fire and rescue, but service authority, finance, HR, sheriff's office. The team came together and responded to the needs of the citizens. This is a satellite image that the Weather Service put out a few days after the event, and this is not clouds. This is a snowpack seen from a satellite. So again, with the other map showing the heavy snowfall amounts, this definitely validates that we were definitely in the bullseye of that. And again, that's our plow truck that we used in order to gain access to scenes and also help one of our ambulances make it to the hospital. Some of the observations I mentioned before, and it's been mentioned, the teamwork. All the departments came together. We were utilizing resources. We were working through problems that were situations that were presented to us, which some departments had supplies or equipment that could help solve that issue for the citizens. So it was definitely the team coming together. I will say, some of the emergency management training that we've done in the past, the scenarios, the exercises we've done in the EOC, the department meetings that we've had with the department heads to talk about our emergency operations plan and bring everyone together and solve these problems. This was, I don't think, a company that creates, training exercises for EOC could have created one like this event. A pandemic response, a historic snowfall with extensive power outages, and then all the other, issues that we had to deal with in the EOC to help the citizens. Public information, we were pushing out as much public information as we could to the citizens. And we worked well with the sheriff's office to make sure the messages that went out was clear and concise to the citizens. Information about the warming shelter that we opened, how to contact the EOC, all that, road closures. We made the firehouses available for citizens that they wanted to bring containers to fill up with water. So we push all that information out and try to make it clear as possible for the citizens to avoid any confusion. Our shelter operations, like that was mentioned, the opening of the shelter, the warming shelter at the Citizen Center, social services, Parks and Rec came together, and they were able to manage that center. And they told us what they needed. We got it for them, and they ran a first-class shelter operation. Our operational briefings, we initiated those twice a day. We did briefings, and we using our virtual meeting capabilities. We brought all the players in, the department heads, the power companies, Dominion, Northern Neck were on our calls, VDOT. They were on our calls also, just to report out what they were encountering, what their next, plans for the operational periods were, so we can adjust our response as much as possible and provide them information to give them assistance in order to meet some of our needs in the county, and also what we could do to help them to, maximize their efforts, and especially restoring power to the citizens. Tracking our power outages. We use the two utilities websites to manage that, to track those, and also some other resources to track the power outages, but also how the power outages affected the county with their firehouses, their critical infrastructure, to make sure that we were getting fuel to generators and what we could do to help the refueling operations. It all goes to our critical infrastructure list of all the service authority sites in the county, fire and rescue, law enforcement, those sites, to make sure the power utilities have those addresses and stuff, so that when they're planning their restoration efforts, they can see where in those outages there are critical infrastructure. Another thing, we were fortunately we didn't have too many issues with fuel, but this is a picture of Sheets. We took the Sheets right there by the firehouse. We took as we drove past it, and the parking lot was full. People were, getting fuel and probably getting a hot meal too there during the height of it. So, the fuel depot that's in the works, that's definitely going to help us, be able to maintain services. So if, an ambulance or a fire truck or a police car or a service authority needed to go get fuel, they wouldn't have to, wait in this long line during an emergency response to get fuel. So that's definitely a much needed resource, and we're definitely looking forward to that. Our public messaging, just want to take the opportunity to remind citizens of the way that we push out messages to the community. Obviously, our KG alert system, kgalert.com, for citizens can go and register their cell phones and email addresses there, and then they'll get notifications on their devices. Especially, that's very helpful if the power is out. Their home computer may not work because of the power being out, but if they still have a charged cell phone, they can definitely still receive the alerts. The county's website worked with Chris and IT to make sure we had the messages across all these platforms, so that whichever way the citizen method they went to get the information, they were able to get that. Just some screenshots of some of the Facebook pages that we use. Obviously, our Facebook page, the Sheriff's Office Facebook page, and we try to share the same message between the two pages. So no matter which page the citizen goes to, the information is the same across both pages. VDEM, Virginia Department of Emergency Management. These are some of the government agencies that push out information, and then we try to share that to the citizens, especially if it's concerning an issue or an impact into our county as we were dealing with this snow event. VDEM, our local weather service, National Weather Service, Baltimore, Washington, which is located up there by Dulles Airport. That's our local weather office that serves our area, and we're sharing forecast information from them and any other weather-related information that should be pushed out to the citizens. And on the preparedness side, ready.gov, their Facebook page, and also their website, ready.gov, where citizens can go get information on how to prepare their home, how to prepare their business, and those kinds of things in order to prepare for an emergency. And these links are also available through the county's website on our fire department webpage to get this also. Some of our next steps, right after that storm, we started preparing for the next storm. And obviously, looking at potential power outages, what impacts, having new snow on top of the current snow would cause, planning for that, if we need to open the shelter. We had plans for that. So it was constant. We were reassessing and adjusting plans. We had a really good after-action discussion, especially about shelter operations, and also on the broader scale with all the county departments who were involved, lessons learned, how to improve, in our response to track things, with finance, HR, IT, Service Authority, Parks and Rec, Social Services, all those players brought them together and captured what they thought we, lessons learned and things that went really well. Our office continues to collect storm-related expenses from the county departments, and we're preparing those reports. If the Virginia Department of Emergency Management requests any additional documentation, we submitted our reports to the state that we do after any local declaration. But if VDEM wants any further documentation about our storm expenses or incidents that we ran during the event, that we have all that information available through the Emergency Management Office. Sure. Oh, yeah, you can answer the question.
I guess it's my turn. My last slide will say questions too, so we'll be all right.
Okay.
Okay, what I'd like, I'm just gonna kind of present the calls for service that the sheriff's office handled. Hello. So I went back through and gathered up data from January 3rd through the 5th. And I thought pretty much after the 5th, everything kind of went back to some sort of a normalcy for the county. Motor vehicle crashes that were considered crashes and not vehicles just stuck in the ditch was 27. Or 26, sorry. This is a picture going into my subdivision. This is one of the calls that we responded to on January 3rd at approximately 11:15. This is the call that came into the office.
King George Office Communications. Do you have any blankets in your car?
All right, let's go back 2 slides and we'll start it again.
King George Sheriff's Office Communications 827.
I'm on the side of the road and a tree just fell right in front of me, at the front of my car, and now I'm stuck.
And it fell on your car?
It hit the front of it. I don't really see much damage, but I'm stuck and I'm about to fall into a ditch. I can't even get out of my car.
Okay, do you know where you're located?
I have no idea. I was up here. I called early. Hold up. I can give you the address. I have to look it up.
And are you injured at all?
I'm not, no, but I have no heat in my car and it's freezing. And
I understand.
Yeah, that's just normal stuff. The location that Google Maps say is 3314 to 3398 Howden Road. I'm stuck on 218, the road 218. That's where the tree fell.
Okay. And what type of vehicle are you in?
I'm in a red SUV.
And can you at all get out of your doors?
I can get out of my other side, but I can get out of it, but like if I do, I'm gonna fall into the ditch.
Okay.
And I'm currently stuck too. I tried to back out and it's not working. I'm just falling into the ditch more and more.
Okay, hold on just 1 second for me, sir, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so that was the initial call we got from that gentleman. We spent the rest of the day with one deputy trying to get to him. Every road that we tried to get through had either power lines down, trees across the roadway, vehicles that were abandoned, left in the roadway that we couldn't get around. And none of the wrecker services were very, didn't want to come out during the height of the storm. So we spent until approximately 4 o'clock trying to get to this man. Now we would call him back periodically just to make sure he was still there before we were using all those resources. So this is one call that happened 2 hours into it.
Do you have any blankets in your car?
I'm literally gonna die out here. I'm literally gonna die. I feel like I'm about to die. I can't do this anymore. I just want to go home. I've been homeless since I was 17. I just want to go home. And I'm freezing to death out here. I am freezing. I haven't ate since yesterday. No, the day before that. Yeah, I haven't ate in a long time. I don't even know when I've ate.
So again, continually throughout the day answering everything else, we continued to try to get to him. And we were actually had stopped a man that had side-by-side ATV and asked him if he could traverse down through there to try to find him, which he did. He was able to locate him, bring him back to the deputy, and the deputy was able to take him to the warming shelter where he stayed for 2 days in the warming shelter. So it's a good ending to that, but it just shows the stuff that Chief Moody and Chief Lynn were talking about, how hard it was to get to these calls for service. Unfortunately, the state police that were assigned to King George, they were pulled out of King George to I-95. We all know the problems that they had up on I-95. We had 101 disabled vehicles. These were vehicles that were either in the ditch lines or in the roadway causing a hazard. And that's how these calls were classified. So you may see a redundancy when it says a hazard for the vehicles in the roadway, but these are how they were classified. So we had 101 disabled vehicles. This is another picture in my subdivision. We had 91 traffic hazards, and these calls could be from vehicles in the roadways that were left abandoned, to trees down in the roadway, to power lines across the roadways, and that's how that was classified. Even during the heights of the storm, we were still checking the buildings. Power's out, alarms are out. So we had 52 security checks during that time frame, during that 72-hour time frame. 26 welfare checks. Mostly the people were calling in to say, hey, look, my family doesn't have a landline. I can't get a hold of them on the cell phones. Can you go by and check on them since I know they don't have any power? This call for service was a check to welfare where the 911 center received a check of the welfare for a citizen who advised she had a roommate that had health issues and she couldn't reach her by phone. The citizen was concerned due to the power outage of the well-being of her friend. Once on the scene, the deputy observed that the driveway was over 100 yards long with downed pine trees, making it impossible to drive up and difficult to walk. The deputy made his way up the driveway on foot and contacted the victim, who stated she was a diabetic, dehydrated, and requested to be transported to the hospital in Fredericksburg. The deputy assessed the situation and decided that the Stokes basket would be needed to carry the victim from her home and down the adjacent power line to a waiting ambulance rather than maneuvering the driveway. With the assistance of the fire department, the patient was packaged in the Stokes basket and safely carried down the power lines to a waiting ambulance. At the time frame that call was done, we had about 10 inches of snow on the ground. So the deputy is in uneven territory along with the assistance of the fire department, carrying this lady down the power lines in the Stokes basket to get her to a waiting ambulance. We had 24 call transfers, which when 911 comes in on a cell phone, it hits the closest tower, bounces into King George. It could be from Caroline, Charles County, Stafford, Prince William. Once the dispatcher, the communications officer would figure out what jurisdiction that call needed to go to, they would transfer that call to that jurisdiction, roughly taking about 3 minutes of their time transferring that call. We had 20 information calls. Now, we classified these information calls because through our CAD system, we have calls that we identify, and these really didn't fall underneath any of the CAD calls that we had. They could vary from somebody calling up saying, hey, I just saw a transformer explode. Tell me when the power's coming back on. Or, hey, do you have a deputy in the area that could give me a ride to the store because I don't have any milk? So we just classified those under the information calls, but we received 20 of those. We had 10 facility calls that were automated. These are automated calls that come in automatically to our system so we could notify the proper authorities that the pump stations were off and needed power. Seven 911 hang-up calls. We had 5 animal-related calls. This horse here was found wandering around the roads. A deputy and animal control were able to get control of the animal through a tow rope that we had and then put him back into the fenced-in area that the horse got out of after animal control went ahead and mended the fence to keep the horse in the fence. Other animal-related calls that we had were people calling in saying, hey, the dogs are outside, or the dogs are inside and there's no power in the house, so it's cold. Can you check on them? But no call that we received caused the animal to be removed from the property or taken into animal control's system. We responded to the fire department with the fire department on 5 occasions. 3 of them was a chimney fire, 1 was a shed fire, and the other one was actually an unfounded structure fire that a lady saw through the woods, thought it was a fire, so she called it in as a structure fire. Some of the miscellaneous calls, we had 7 calls for the traffic light being out, 6 calls to assist the power companies when they were pulling lines for traffic control, 5 suspicious activities. We actually did make traffic stops during that time, and we had 2 escorts. Oops, back that joker up. Back that joker up. One more time. One more time. Sorry. This is another call for service where the fire department and the sheriff's office worked in tandem. We had a 911 call that was received that a female was a high-risk pregnancy and was having difficulties, and she would need to be transported to Fredericksburg to the hospital. Due to the treacherous road conditions, the ambulance couldn't make it to the caller's residence. A deputy responded in his assigned 4x4 SUV to the residence and transported the female to a location where she was transferred to an ambulance and subsequently transported up to the hospital. We also responded to 2 CPR in progress calls, which unfortunately both citizens did not make that call. We assisted in monitoring Lake Monroe Dam that was having issues. So the total number of calls that the sheriff's office responded to in a 72-hour period was 430 calls. Mr. Dines? In conclusion, there were no deputies were injured during this snow event. There were no injuries reported in any of the traffic crashes or incidents, and we logged in 219 hours of overtime during that 72-hour period. Some of the thoughts for the future that we have is we found this vehicle to be very advantageous in getting around down trees and abandoned vehicles that are left on the roadways. It made the conventional vehicles virtually impossible during this storm to get around them. With a vehicle like this, we can assist fire and rescue, we can assist ourselves, but I will be searching out grants to see if I can fund a vehicle like this for the next disaster. Hopefully it won't be too soon. So there's my question for you. Do you want to wait till the end of it, or do you want to just?
Yes, if you don't mind. Just to add a few more points, and I think it goes as an understatement that our fire and rescue department and the sheriff's office, we work hand to hand on a daily basis, but we could not have responded to the community's needs if we didn't have that partnership. The whole county team, as Mr. Miller had spoke of earlier, had to come together. Responding to a once in a 25, 30-year event with on top of a pandemic, we had 12 people of our personnel out on COVID, and then we were asking the healthy workers to work more and to work under treacherous conditions. Just to give you a summary of our calls in 72 hours, we typically run anywhere between 300 to 350 calls per month on average. In 72 hours, we ran 98 calls. Many of these that Chief Lynn mentioned and also the sheriff mentioned. The Monday, the 3rd, was 38 calls. The 4th was 32. The 5th was 28. Some of these stories, just to put in a little bit more perspective, we have never, ever had to put a snowplow in front of an ambulance all the way from King George County to Mary Washington Hospital. If that was a time to deliver a baby, that was the worst time in history, was Monday morning on January 3rd of 2022. And that wasn't just a normal delivery. That was a patient that had uncontrollable hemorrhage and had a ruptured placenta. And so it was a high priority medical emergency. Our ambulance and snowplow actually had to detour in a neighborhood because they couldn't take the traditional Route 3 to Route 1 to get to Mary Washington Hospital. They had to go in downtown Fredericksburg, and that extended the delay to get to Mary Washington Hospital. So it was just that particular call went out at 9:47 a.m. One of the sheriff's supervisors, First Sergeant, I believe Deputy Simmons, had that female patient in his vehicle and had to rendezvous with the ambulance. We just could not get to that patient. That call, the last unit that actually cleared to get back to the county took, it was close to 2 o'clock that afternoon, from 9:47 in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So you can see just how that one call, we had one case where our Engine 3 in Fairview Beach, Mr. Collins, as you know, living in that area of Potomac Landing, Fairview Beach was essentially an island for a couple days. You couldn't get down it, you couldn't get up it. And we have an option, a secondary bypass to get there through Potomac Landing. And we looked at that option if we had a significant emergency. But we were going to a call at 4 o'clock in the morning, and our engine was trying to make it up the hill on Fairview Drive. And as it was approaching Caledon Road, it couldn't get any traction, and the engine actually started sliding backwards into the ditch line. So we had to abandon the truck, our crew did, and walk back several blocks to the fire station. And VDOT had told us we can't come out until the sun comes up and we get some sun on that road. It's too dangerous for the plow trucks or even some of the heavy equipment. But those were just some of the type of conditions. Multiple motor vehicle crashes, as was mentioned, 5 structure fires, 5 carbon monoxide activations. We did have one deceased elderly male out in the Matthias Point area. The daughter came to check on her father, found her father in the garage with a generator running in the garage. So we put that message out, seems like multiple times a year, and it seems to be there's always a casualty that we can point to, unfortunately. And after Hurricane Isabel, some of y'all remember Hurricane Isabel, 2003. It devastated the county, and one of the things we got through a mitigation grant was to put generators at all our county infrastructure. And those generators really proved dividends with a week without power in all of our, including this building, the courthouse, all the fire stations, all the wastewater pump stations, the Citizen Center. So it really proved valuable to have those generators in place. And just our team coming together. I know this was a major event where Mr. Miller also wears the hat of emergency management director under state law that the board appoints him to. And I think our overall coordination really worked very effectively to try to push out information to the board and having 2 operational meetings to really wrap our arms around this incident. It was very, very much unprecedented. Other than that, that's certainly all I have. I think everything else was pretty much covered. And any questions for myself or Sheriff Giles or Chief Lynn?
Thank you all 3. Questions?
I have comments.
Hang on for 1 second. Mrs. Bender?
Yes, I want to thank you. I've thanked you several times, but I want to thank you again. That was amazing stories, and just thank you for your service. But I did want to bring up again, maybe have a discussion with you about having a list that citizens that, maybe criteria, I'm not sure. But the gentleman who was on the oxygen actually contacted me last week and mentioned that he was so appreciative that his power got turned down and he was really worried. And he even brought it up again because he had said he's reached out to Dominion numerous times and filled out a form, and he should have been on the list and he wasn't. So if it is possible, I'll be willing to help create a list that, for the citizens that really want to be on the list, that they have medical issues, that if we lose power or some kind of event, that we just call and check on them to make sure they're okay. So that's all I wanted to ask, that we look into that. Thank you.
That's a great point.
Can we just do questions right now when we get done with the questions for these guys? We can go into comments right after that, so we can get our questions out while we still have them.
One question.
Mr. Collins?
Sheriff, were there any TDOs during this time? Thank God.
Mr. Chairman, can I add something also about the power outages? One thing that I meant to cover. Those numbers that Chief Lynn put up there on the board, where it says, we were close to 8,000, those are customers, which to the power companies, those are accounts. So when you take that and you multiply that by the average number of people in a household, for example, this building that we're sitting in right here is one account. The high school is one account. So these are, just to put that in a little bit in perspective of that when we see that many accounts, that is affecting a large portion of our citizenry.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a follow-up question? Chief Moody, I appreciate you bringing forward the Company 3 engine being stuck there on Fairview Drive, because it did receive a great deal of attention on social media. So it's my understanding, despite the fact that the apparatus had to be unfortunately abandoned in the roadway temporarily until VDOT could get the roads plowed, we did still have personnel at Company 3 proper who were able to respond to anything that happened in Fairview Beach, because you made the good point about the fact that it kind of is an island, other than the mention of an alternate route through Potomac Landing to attend to our constituents' needs.
That is absolutely correct. In fact, when the crew left the engine during that period, we knew we couldn't call a tow and recovery. It wouldn't come out. So essentially, they left the engine and walked several blocks back to the station, and left the lights on for warning purposes, and then later were able to retrieve the truck. So I was aware that it did receive a little bit of, there was a few individuals that had some bad comments about that. And it's an unfortunate circumstance. I think it just goes back to, hey, we're servicing the citizens 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if that call goes out at 4 o'clock in the morning, then that's where we go. And we try every effort to get to that individual that's calling 911 with whatever the emergency is. But yes, they were back at that station, and we kept personnel there so that, because again, you couldn't get in and you couldn't get out for a number of hours.
Thank you very much for clarifying.
Mr. Collins, you said you had a question?
Comments?
All right, just hang tight for me for a minute. Mr. Granger.
Sir, thank you. So the engine got stuck, and you said it started sliding back into the ditch. Did it actually go in the ditch, or did it stay on the road?
It stayed on the road. There was no damage done to the vehicle.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to. Thank you.
Mr. Collins.
So, Chief Moody, Fire and Rescue, every time you're called, you come no matter what. Sheriff Giles, every time you come, no matter what the circumstances, no matter what the weather is, no matter what you all going to get there. I've seen it over and over. When I was out and about, I saw y'all working. I saw a lot of y'all everywhere doing what you do, is taking care of people. And I thank you. I also want to thank the county staff, all the folks that were, they were the building and grounds folks. They were plowing and had administrative people doing work, and you had, just King George County, the folks that work for King George County and the Fire and Rescue and the Sheriff's Office are spectacular. We know that. That's why we live here. If you could just start, furnish us with some power, everything would be perfect here. My comment would be, the only negative comment I have is to the power company. You know, I hear historic events every year. I've lived here a long time. And we've had an historic event every year. Snow, tornadoes, water, you name it. And we had 58% of our folks' accounts without power. And, you know, power is a necessary thing for us to have to function. And the reason I bring this comment up is because I did go to Fredericksburg, and I mentioned earlier at an earlier meeting that there was one truck in my district, because I drove my whole district to check, and there were 127 trucks between the county line in Stafford and Butler Road. And I talked to the Dominion Power, and they said they would try to get more trucks, but it always seems like that King George is the last one on the list for these type of events. But I commend the local folks. If you want to start a generation, we'd love to have that. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, I do have one comment. I did notice, you know, the amount of trees that were down in the border between Stafford County and King George on 218. And I drove last week down there, and I was amazed. You could tell how many trees, especially in two particular sections. And I was wondering maybe if we reach out to Dominion and Northern Neck to make sure that they're trimming trees that are so close to those power lines when we do get an event, either hurricane season or in the winter storms, because that might have maybe mitigated some of it, because there's a lot of trees, and there were a lot of trees right next to those power lines. Just a thought.
So Virginia Power gives the political committee $125 million, but we can't get power. So there's something wrong there. You know, it's problematic that we always seem to be last on the list in the region 16. They're always functioning up there. So that's the last negative comment I'll have to make. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to reiterate what Mr. Collins said. Your motto on your sign and your trucks, Chief, and I know it's not on yours, Sheriff Giles, but I'm sure you share the sentiment, and the whole county as well, our family protecting yours. And we saw firsthand, first class, well worth every penny of that public safety compensation plan last year. Thank you.
Ranger?
Thank you for the brief. Thank you for the thoroughness and helping us, especially the calls. That was really impactful to hear. Thank you for the service to both your departments, to all of staff. I know Mr. Chris Clark was involved in it as well. So many were involved. I don't forget so many people, but thank you to everyone for just helping to make sure our community was safe and continuing to do that. But, you know, it was an exceptional event, and to work through that, it's amazing. So thank you.
I'm just glad we're not in Boston or on Cape Cod with those snow totals. I mean, that's some serious snow up there. But I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. The whole team was great. I mean, I was in all of those meetings, the Zoom meetings and everything, and through the state, through you guys. You know, social services, Mr. Clark, you know, every department kind of pulled together to really help this along. And, you know, it really kept everybody up to date, you know, with the latest info that we could then give out to the public as well. So I mean, you guys did a phenomenal job. I remember what it was like to work these snowstorms. It's not fun. So just wanted to say thank you all.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just wrap it up from our standpoint. So as you remember, we did an after action as Mr. Lind, as Chief Lind talked about. We've done an after action. We have obviously identified a number of things that we'll be incorporating. Excuse me. I will say this, that our power companies, our two power companies that service Northern Neck and Dominion, they're our partners too in this whole emergency management system. we're going to work with them to make sure that, you know, our communication with them and what our needs are is very clear. I think that one of the things that's really overlooked is that, yes, the January 3rd through the 5th was kind of a good snapshot of things. This continued through the weekend. I know that some of you all got calls from customers that were still out. And so our efforts and Steve Lynn's efforts and Chief Moody's efforts, and I know Sheriff Giles was still answering calls of, you know, how can we get our power restored? How can we get, and so our job is to get as accurate information so that we can convey that to citizens, convey that to you all who are getting contacts by your constituents. But we know and we value our power companies, and I do think that we just need to, whatever deficiencies or whatever issues may have happened with this one, I don't think it's something that we want to, you know, cast a negative light on. This was a challenging issue for them, and I think we'll work with them to make sure that their information that they're providing to our emergency team is accurate and as up to date as we can, and we'll make that happen for you all. And again, you know, this is wintertime right now, and we understand that, you know, we could have one this weekend, we could have one in 2 weeks. These guys are ready. I think that everybody in this team is ready, and we appreciate your comments and the questions that you have are very helpful. But, you know, I do think that it shows the dedication, and, you know, these guys aren't up here just to be glorified at all. I mean, they're here to tell you something, and this is their jobs. We all know this, and every one of those individual staff members that was involved in the whole emergency management activity over the course of this storm, they're dedicated employees, and I just appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I don't know where you were going, and I hope I'm interrupting you or getting caught ahead of the horse, but we couldn't do our job without the support that you guys give us. So, I mean, I appreciate the accolades that you're giving my office, and I hope I'm not speaking for Chief Moody, but for his as well. But without your support and the things that you've done to support us and give us the necessary tools to do the job, we couldn't do that. And I just want to put that out there, that I appreciate it from my office, the support that we get from you. So thank you.
I echo the same comments.
All right, thank you.
I would just like to mention the role General Properties played in this event. Plowing the parking lots, helping you know, service the generators, maintain our parking lot, have the Citizen Center ready as a warming shelter. Those guys worked a lot to push snow, and without that, it would definitely cause more of an impact. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, we all work for the citizens. We're all just one big team, just all different gears in the motor. So thank you all. Moving along to the next presentation, Northern Neck broadband presentation by All Points Broadband.
It's going to be maybe hard to follow some stories of real life heroes keeping people safe in your community, but I'll do my best.
You gonna keep the cable up during the next snowstorm?
The snowstorm, it affected us a little bit too on the construction side, and trying to get an electric company's attention to build new things that week or the week after while they were repairing their existing infrastructure was difficult, counted for a little bit of a delay, but I think they're back working on new stuff now. So we're going to do a quick update on where we stand from the phase 1 project that brought together the state money, local money, and some federal money from the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. Just a reminder about All Points Broadband. So we are a rural-based broadband company that focuses primarily on low-density areas as opposed to building in urban or suburban areas and building out. We focus on the rural areas. So each of the last 4 years, We've been a quickly growing company on the Inc. 5000 list of America's fastest privately held companies. Last year, we brought in for our local jurisdictions about $300 million of state, federal grants and electric utility co-investment. And King George, that's through Dominion and Northern Neck. We also last year added a critical partner to us in helping with the fiber to the home deployment. It's a company called Searchlight Capital Partners. Through their investments, they're the #4 builder of fiber to the home in the country. We recognize that we needed their help and expertise in delivering on the projects here in the Northern Neck, particularly in King George. This project, the Northern Neck, is our priority. And as King George, you all stepped up and made the $500,000 initial deployment to get King George started for #1 in our construction sequence. We now have opened a second construction area down in the Warsaw area, but King George is still #1. So we're going to go through the overview of how we got to where we are now, talk a little bit about the construction sequencing and the King George status, and then a couple of other additional updates. If you have any questions along the way, just ask as they come in. If they are specific to maybe 1 or 2 constituents, happy to handle that offline as well. So we started this back in early 2020, which feels like a lifetime ago. We came together with a plan that we could combine the multiple counties for a regional project and break the mold for a VADI grant project application. So VADI is the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative. We combined that with about $8.5 million of federal money in a new program that was starting in 2020. And in mid-2021, all the counties came together and said, we want to apply for this money in 2021. A parallel process to that was the federal program that we applied for, which is the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. We have finally been awarded that money. That started in December of 2021. That's a federal program that took longer than even the federal agency said it would take, which has caused some delay for us, but we got all of that money. That started in December. In 2021, in the second round of the VADI application, we added some locations in King George to accelerate the RDOF build. So in the federal program, you're supposed to build out locations over 6 years. We wanted to cut that in half in King George down to 3. We should be finished with those in 2023, but it's separate from this phase 1 project. So as I said, there's 2 construction areas in the Northwest in King George, and then Warsaw, we opened up a second front to stay on track. We had a delay in getting started, delay in getting under contract with the state. So in order to stay on track for the end goal of 2023, we had to open a new head in Warsaw. Right now, we have 20 miles released to construction in the Northwest area. By the end of Q1, we'll have another 100 miles spread between those 2 zones. Here are the mainline fiber routes. This is for phase 1, not for phase 2, but the mainline fiber routes there in orange. All of those green dots are the locations that were funded in phase 1. It's about 1,700 locations, 180 miles of new distribution fiber in the county. That doesn't include all of the very last miles in the drops, but it's 180 miles of mainline distribution. You have an opportunity for residents to pre-register their location, determine whether or not they're in the project at fiber.allpointsbroadband.com. I just checked earlier this evening. You have over 600 who have already pre-registered, which is a high percent at this point in the process. This final bullet on the left, this is a new program that we are rolling out It's called the Affordable Connectivity Program. It offers a $30 per month discount to eligible households. It's a federal program for low to moderate income households. So if you are participating in a free and reduced lunch program, you contact All Points Broadband and we take $30 per month off of your recurring bill. And this applies to any residential service. That money is there until it runs out at the federal level, and it's about $14 billion. So it's a lot of months of people's bill getting reduced by $30 a month. On the right-hand side here, we have what's called the rack rate. So this is before promotions or discounts. We have 4 service levels. We added one in at that 500 by 500 service level. That wasn't originally in there, but we added one at a $99 list price point. We have built the network and designed it to scale up to 10 gig by 10 gig. So right now that 1,000 megabits is what you call gigabit service. We've designed the entire network to easily scale up to 10 gigs by 10 gigs for each location. There's no resident now that I know of that could use that, so it's not an offered service. But it's a long-term project. We want to be able to service all of their demand for the foreseeable future. So last year, as you may be aware, there were a lot of issues in the global supply chain, especially with fiber optic cables, with all of the plastic that it depends on, not only with the cable, but also the conduit. So we spent a lot of time negotiating and building a relationship with a global distributor that has a facility in Ashland nearby. They committed to not only manufacture, but hold all of the materials for all of the Northern Egg project and all of our Virginia projects at their facility in Ashland. It was a big win for us because some companies were having trouble just getting basic spools of cable. We have all the materials here that we housed in Ashland and delivered to our own teams and our contractors as needed. You may see out in the field the make-ready engineers reviewing poles, updating poles. That activity is going on now. Overall, the project is still on schedule to be done in the fourth quarter of 2023. The goal for King George County is substantial completion at the end of this year. So that means the mainline fibers will be built. Not all of the customer drops will be delivered by then, but people will be able to sign up. All of the mainline will be done. We'll continue to add customers as they request service, even obviously after the project ends. We expect to be activating customers in Q3, so they'll be getting more mailers than they've ever wanted about 90 days before that activation is available for them. Again, if they ask, please direct folks to fiber.allpointsbroadband.com. They can determine whether or not they're in the project area. Based on the address that they put in, they'll get a different series of questions. So if they're not technically in the project area, we still want to collect data about them. And, you know, if they weren't included and they are unserved, meaning, let's say an incumbent cable provider has offered them a $8,000 install price, but has claimed to serve them, we'll try to find a way to get them included as an unserved location. We have a rolling sequence of interactions with potential customers, 60, 90, and 30 days out. This includes mailers, flyers, social media. We're going to make it very difficult for them to not know that broadband is available in their area. There are metrics that we report to the PDC, who's the grant applicant, and to the state agency about the take rate, how many folks are actually adopting this service. And we're graded on that, and we want to get as many people signed up as possible. Not only because it's the right thing to do, you made a statement about connecting the unserved, but these are the numbers that we report to the people overseeing the grant. So additional updates, we are going to have our regional office and training facility in Warsaw We're gonna have construction yard, resupply zones up here in King George. As we transition more completely to the construction phase, you'll see more of the 4 folks leading our OSP, which stands for Outside Plant Construction. Sean Flora is our Director of Fiber Construction. Lee Groves, David Downs, and Brent Creech are all senior managers of OSP Construction. They manage the relationships with Dominion, Northern Neck, our contractors, the employees who are actually in the field doing the work. So you'll see less from me and more updates from them. We are going to be hiring field technicians, customer support reps, field sales reps on our website or directly through our hr@allpointsbroadband.com. I believe we've already been forwarded at least 2 different contractors by board members. If there are any local contractors who do want to do fiber work for the project, I would ask them to email osp@allpointsbroadband.com. We always need more help, and sure you have local contractors to do this work all the time. So that's a quick update, and I'm happy to take any questions or provide any other further comments.
Thank you, sir. Any questions? Spender.
I have several questions because I've had a lot of constituents in Shiloh have a lot of questions. And customer drop, is that a fee? And I'm guessing customer drop is to the house from the power line. Is that correct?
Well, it is from the power line, but it's not always necessarily the power line at the end of your driveway. It's going to be on the power line from a device called a terminal, and that's where we plug in the wire. That's a drop, and then we run it to the house.
Is that a charge for the customers that sign up?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the charge amount?
I believe it's $199 for
One-time fee?
Yes. So the included drop length is 500 feet. I think a typical cable drop is about 200 feet. So we tried to offer more, but obviously 500 feet won't cover everyone, but it covers the majority of folks.
And I have 2 more questions. The next one is easy. Can you send that presentation to our county administrator so he can send it out to all of us?
Yes.
Thank you. And then the last one is one that has been bothering me for a while, and I've had several constituents bring this up, is, there's a big discussion about unserved and underserved and ability to be able to get internet to their house. I live on a road that one quote was quite a bit of money to lay a line, which gives it a path to entry that some people can't afford. So why cannot anybody come to your website? And I think you might have, what?
Was that in this project?
Oh, it just is from a cable company. That's where I'm getting at. Hold on a second. So if a customer wants to get internet service and they've been quoted a bit of money to bring the line to their house, but they want to sign up for your service, can anyone in this county sign up for your service and get service? Or is it only certain areas?
So we applied for and received a grant for very specific locations. Those are the customers that can sign up for this project. And we try to send them to that pre-registration site, and we have a database with their addresses. If they put in an address and it matches that's in the project, they get a certain set of questions to pre-register. If it's an address that's not in our existing database for the very specific grant, they get a slightly different set of questions, and we ask something like, well, what did that other company charge you for an install fee? And we use that data to then in the future determine that address is actually unserved. But we can't, during the course of this project, you have to be one of those addresses that was actually part of the specific application.
But I guess my question is, why?
That's the rules of the program. So in order to get the grant approved, we had to propose a list of several thousand locations that we can say are unserved. And part of the process is that they make that list publicly available, and other companies can say, well, actually, there's locations there that we serve. Government money shouldn't be used to overbuild my existing infrastructure. And so we went through that process, and we were very diligent about it. And we were challenged, I think, for about 1,000 locations across the Northern Neck. It turned out we were right on every single one, and none were actually served by an existing provider. And it gave us a lot of credibility as a grant applicant. The downside is if you're not on that list, you're not technically in the project.
So is that done by census block?
No, we drove every single road and looked to see if there was a cable capable of serving a house. And if there wasn't, we included it on an unserved list. Now the census block maps, it's called the Form 477, and there are plenty of issues with the way that mapping works, because if one home in the census block has service, then according to the FCC, the whole block is served. We all know that's not true. They're redoing those rules now in time for the infrastructure bill, but at the time we did this, we knew that those maps were incorrect, so we drove every road that had a census block where we thought, maybe this federal map is wrong.
Okay, they clarified, but there still are those out there that are unserved, even though the cable companies have said that they are served. So I mean, I've had those residents reach out to me, so that's where I'm asking, because they see the grant and want to know why they can't be served.
Right. And that's a key point, and it's always difficult to explain and have a consistent answer for whomever makes the rules. The underserved is it's just a tough set of locations to clearly identify. Hopefully, if there's some new mapping that comes out later this year, they'll be more specific. But right now, we're stuck with those legacy issues.
But as you said earlier, anyone can reach out and see if they're on the list, or maybe contact you if they're considered in the served.
Yes, strongly encourage them, whether or not they look like they're on the map in the project or not, have them go to that website and complete the survey.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Granger?
Yes, sir. Thank you. You mentioned 500-foot distance for connection for citizens, so I imagine that would probably cover a great number. Is there any recourse for people who would be further than 500? Like, is it a higher cost, or is it just can't be served?
It is a higher cost. So one of the issues that we've seen, that we got a lot of feedback about from homeowners who receive an install quote from an incumbent provider that seems to be made up out of thin air. The industry term is a go-away price, right? The way that we are structuring our price is to be as transparent as we can. We have our cost plus 10%, and it's probably in the range of $1.45, $1.55 per foot for a drop after that 500-foot length. But we will report the data that underlines those costs and avoid the kind of arbitrary, 5,000 here, 8,000 there.
I appreciate that transparency. One other question. So you talked about it might not be like right at the end of someone's driveway where they'd be branching off. What if the lines are underground? Do you branch off of underground lines, or do you only branch off of above ground lines?
Well, so I was an engineer, a different kind of engineer, but I believe for underground there would be a handhold or a pedestal, and the splice box would be in there.
Interesting.
They wouldn't have to run the cable up to an aerial MST drop.
Okay. Tracking. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mrs. Scoville?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for coming out and giving us an update on the status of the project. I do have a few questions for you. First is the recent grant award, the recent VATI grant award that was announced in December for another phase. So is that more years added on, or are you able to implement some of that at the same time that you're building out the network for phase 1 and phase 2 RDOF?
So That's a good question. We are, we're working on that process with DHCD, getting under grant contract for that second phase. And that started, I think, maybe 2.5 weeks ago. The goal is to have the construction happening at the same time, right? To reduce mobilization costs, to enhance efficiencies. We're confident though that the reporting is going to be separate. It's two different sources of money. The program rules have changed from year to year. So it's not going to be exactly the same, but the construction timing we're trying to compress as much as we can.
Thank you. Okay, so next question, and I sent you some questions ahead of time. So just for generally, the reason certain areas get different speed options and different pricing has to do with when the VATI grant application was submitted and how much time went between?
Well, so some of those examples in the email forwarded were comparing a 2021 cycle to a 2022. So the rules are different. The source of federal money is different. So there are some differences there. I think that was like a Loudoun and a Middlesex.
Yes.
So that was this most recent round, and they have different rules. Just like the several hundred locations in King George in phase 2 have different rules than phase 1. But the overall, it's going to be the same, right? They're going to result in universal fiber to the home, same network architecture. It's just different program rules and slightly different leverages on the scoring in the grant application. So something that was worth, let's say, 40 points in the 2021 cycle was worth 15. So we emphasized that category less. Other categories like getting to universal broadband was much more important this past cycle. So that was important. And then that has implications on the cost.
Gotcha. So then the installation fee for the drop, the $199, assuming you're not going beyond the 500 feet, that for right now would only be for the ones covered under the grant application.
Yes.
The grant application, the projects, the portions of the projects funded by the particular VATI grant applications.
Yes. And after the project ends, that's also going to be our standard length too. We're not going to cut it back down to the industry 200 feet.
Okay. So I think most of the rest of my questions, if you can just get back to me on the specific areas that I sent to you, I would appreciate that. And, and one other comment Ms. Binder made. Yeah, I just heard from another constituent last week who was offered service from a certain incumbent provider and originally told it would cost $5,000. And then she was told a few weeks later, no, it's going to cost $20,000. Do I have to pay that? And my response was, I'm not sure you're served by them truly if it would cost you $20,000 out of your own pocket to allow them to provide you service. So I guess is the nicest way that I could say that. So I think we're seeing a difference in, we have an incumbent who, and we did get some clarification on this from staff, that has one segment of the business, which is the cable franchise, and the internet service provider section is a totally different business sector that it sounds like down the line, you're outside of the VATI grant, you're still welcoming people even though they are considered served, to fill out the form on your website for possible service in the future. But obviously that couldn't happen under the terms of the VATI grant because they've already been defined as served. Is that kind of how,
I would encourage everyone to go to that website, put in their address, go through whichever set of questionnaires they get. And the more accurate and truthful data that they put in there, the more helpful it will be for their broadband. And so you can still get a quote like that and be considered served on the FCC map because someone else closer to the road on the other side of the census block has access. And so what we did was we knew those maps were wrong, and we spent the time to go through and try to figure out, as many places where we knew those maps were wrong as we could and get them added to the project. And so there may be, some locations that were left out, but we tried to be conservative and win that grant.
so then a follow-up with regard to going on the website. So you go on the website, and what I'm hearing from my constituents, because I'm not there yet. I think I'm in maybe the new grant that was just approved last month, maybe. I didn't make it in the first cut, but they're sending me screenshots. So I'm saying, okay, when you go in there and you sign up, what does your dashboard look like? So if they have something that says Northern Neck Project Phase 1 or Phase 2, that's that first VATI grant and the RDOF, right? And then they have a % progress bar. Even if it says 0%, that means they're in for at least that phase of the project. Is that correct?
Yeah, in my response, I'll go through some of the screenshots, but I would not worry about the progress bar. That's kind of built into this, the CRM, the database, to show them some progress. But if they are in there and they're included in the project, they don't have to do anything else. There's no, nothing else on their end to do.
But them seeing that on their dashboard, that tells them that their location is in there.
Yes, I believe so.
Because
Otherwise, it would say,
mine didn't say anything for the first two, the first VATI or the RDOF. I had nothing, so, okay. All right, thanks very much.
Mr. Collins? No questions? Anything else? All right. Thank you for the update. I'm glad that we got that information. I actually had somebody call me the other day, and they said that All Points said to call me about cable, about when it was coming. So I'm glad that you came. So I have some better answers for now, but I also really like that that the go away price. That was pretty good. I've heard two go away prices. One was 30K and the other was 60K to get cable to go down somebody's road. So that was it's a very good answer to those pricing. So thank you.
thank you.
All right, moving along to action items. Department of Finance 204, budget amendment appropriation of federal ARP funding for King George EMS healthcare expenses. Welcome, Mrs. Hahn.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the board. On November 24, 2021, the King George County was notified that EMS would receive federal ARP provider relief funding totaling $34,249. A revenue budget line will be added to the ARP fund titled Federal Aid ARP Provider Relief, and an expenditure budget line titled ARP EMS Healthcare to track expenses related to pre-hospital healthcare. Therefore, and that award letter was included in your board packet for y'all's review. And therefore, it is recommended that the board amend the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget to include the federal ARP funding and appropriate $34,249 into the ARP fund for EMS healthcare expenses.
Any questions for Mrs. Hahn? Do we have a motion?
I move to amend the fiscal year 2021-2022 budget to include the federal ARP funding and appropriate $34,249 into the ARP fund for EMS healthcare expenses.
Second.
A motion properly second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, vote aye, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, chair votes aye. Motion passes. 2005 Department of Finance provide funding to Empower House due to a loss of the federal grant.
Yes, so as many of you who were on the board this past budget season, you did mention Empower House in our budget talks. And so it has recently come to my attention that Empower House has been receiving a US DOJ OVW Improved Criminal Justice Response Grant that began 10/1/2018. This was a 3-year grant that has provided a forensic nurse examiner at Mary Washington Healthcare to treat, care for, and collect forensic evidence from violence victims at the Mary Washington Healthcare Emergency Center. And Safe Harbor Child Advocacy Center. Sorry. The grant was not renewed as they had anticipated, and so therefore they're coming in mid-year to ask for a budget amount of $7,919 from King George County. You'll see that there were approximately 200 residents of King George County that were served through this, which amounted to about 11.7% of the funding that they were short. So I am recommending action to authorize the county administrator to transfer $7,919 from the general fund balance to the Empower House budget line.
Thank you. Any questions?
So if you don't give them that money, will you still get that service provided?
They risk losing that position, that forensic nurse that is at the hospital. So in short, no, that person would not be there.
So it all hinges on King George County for $7,000.
All of the counties that are served are being asked to contribute. We're only being asked to contribute a small portion. So if we don't contribute ours, then somebody else would have to contribute more than their percentage, basically.
Anything else, Mr. Collins? No?
Mr. Chair, I just thought of a question. Is the amount based on how many King George residents are served, or is it based on population? How do they figure out?
The amount is to take the salary of this individual, and then there's the person at the Safe Harbor Child Advocacy Center mostly attends to Stafford County, so that is not figured into the cost. There was information in the board packet about how the costs were arrived at and how much the salary and benefits are, and then based on percentages as to each county's request from each county. So it's, it is taken on the salary and then the percentage that is used.
Clarification, thank you.
But the same nurse, Mary Washington still provides the same nurse. This is just another. This is from Empower House. So you wouldn't lose the same nurse. You would lose Empower House's same nurse. Is that correct?
This nurse is provided through that grant. And so as any grant position, if it's funded by a grant and the grant is lost unless funding can be obtained elsewhere, that position would be lost.
Before you have a motion, I would suggest that we might want to find out specifically if the
service will still be provided by Mary Washington Hospital as it has been in the last, 15 years, without us giving money to the Empower House.
Prior to that grant, King George County did provide funding to Empower House. And they are in the process. In March, will be submitting their grant application to have it reinstated.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Hahn, is there a timeline on this?
They're wanting it as soon as possible.
Right, but what I'm saying is like, so if what Mr. Collins is asking, if the board, it's their pleasure to ask for us to get more information and, or to have one of their representatives here at the next meeting, then if that will help the process, obviously King George is part of a region, and regional services sometimes demand that there is a need to fund it. It's like the jail board. If we decide that we're not going to fund the jail board, then that's going to affect our ability to have inmates housed in the Rappahannock Regional Jail. So there is a logical reason for this request, and I think that if Mr. Collins is asking for more information, I just want to make sure that we're not going to, butt up against a hard deadline that they need.
I'm not sure that they gave a specific deadline. I actually should have brought this to the last meeting, but with all the other budget things going on, it kind of slid. And so, I do apologize for that. I should have brought it earlier. I know of one county who has already agreed to their amount. And I believe, of course, Stafford probably has as well, so.
This is the first reading, and we don't have an endless supply of money. This budget year will be short already. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Cubgo.
So, I absolutely would support this, but I agree with Mr. Collins. I don't feel like we have enough information tonight to take action on this. I think Mr. Miller's suggestion of having someone from Empower House come, it says in the packet, the grant paid for forensic nurse examiner at Mary Washington Healthcare to treat, care for, and collect forensic evidence, so on and so forth. But it also paid for 6/10 of a full-time employee or full-time equivalent Empower House victim advocate at a courtesy desk in Stafford's sheriff's office to support Stafford domestic violence victims. And I get that. I would hope that the extra cost for that would be absorbed in Stafford's greater contribution, but I don't, and I appreciate the value that they bring and the partnership that they bring to the region. I attended their candlelight vigil back in the fall. So I heard the stories firsthand from someone from King George who spoke to how effective the organization is and how they helped her. But I just feel like this request kind of is putting you in a bad spot. And I think we need them to come advocate and answer our questions before we move forward with this.
We will arrange to have somebody at the next meeting if that's the pleasure of the board.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think we need some more about that, some more information. Do you know offhand what we put in the budget for Empower House before?
I'm not sure because, like I said, it's been a few years. I can go back and look.
Well, they were on our list for this year, right?
No, they were not. And they have not been. And you all asked me at the budget work sessions why it wasn't in anyone's. We checked with the sheriff's office. We checked with social services, and no one was contributing any funding to Empower House. And this is the answer, is because they did have the grant. So in past years prior to the grant, the county did contribute. I just don't know how much.
Okay. Yeah, I would be, I'm all for it. I also attended that candlelight vigil and I know what they do, so I'm all in support of it. But I think we definitely need some more information. So why don't we hold off on this, Mr. Miller, if you can get somebody from Empower House to the next meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
You're still with us for 2006 Department of Finance, convert a part-time position to full-time position at the landfill.
Yes, so you all know that we recently, through the ARP funding, that we purchased a roll-off truck. That roll-off truck is now in the possession of King George County. Also at a previous meeting, you approved to convert a part-time position to a full-time for a CDL driver for that roll-off truck. Based on the schedule that we work at the convenience centers to pull the containers to take them to the landfill, one full-time CDL driver does not cover the Monday through, I think, Saturday pulls that we do. Is that correct, Mr. Jenkins? And so we do have another part-time CDL driver that we would like to convert from part-time to full-time. And so currently the part-time position that money in the budget already to cover through the end of the year is $7,305. To convert this to full-time, we would need $21,737, which that's an additional $14,432. The recommended action is to authorize the county administrator to transfer $14,000, and I have a typo right there, $432 from the general fund balance to the landfill budget to convert a part-time position to a full-time.
Thank you. Any questions?
So I wasn't on the board when the you all got the additional roll off, but I was listening. So now mid-year need more money to convert somebody from part-time to full-time. Is that what I'm hearing?
And yes, and during those budget discussions back then, we did talk about that we would need CDL drivers to operate this piece of equipment. Currently, we're spending about $60,000 a year for roll-off truck service, and we're at the liberty of when they are available to come and pull. So there are times when they will come and pull canisters, but then they drop them at the landfill, go service someone else, and our citizens are coming to the convenience center and cannot. I think you've almost come to closing before the convenience centers because they don't have the containers there for the citizens to dump their trash.
So when it was approved for the roll-off truck, it was also discussed during those meetings about one driver, not an additional driver. So the landfill is supposed to be a revenue generator, not costing us money.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, so this is necessary because previous boards and previous administrations had amended the agreement that we have with Waste Management, where we now have taken on the full responsibility of operating the convenience centers. This was not something that was in place 3 to 4 years ago. That is why we asked for the capital purchase of the vehicle, the roll-off truck. The other aspect of that then becomes operational. These are things that have been, in a sense, an unfunded mandate put on the board and put on the county that were not in place several years ago. So that is why we're here. It is not a frivolous request. It is a need that this county, if you're going to provide the service at the convenience centers, Sealston and Perkins Corner, you've got to adequately staff it. I don't think that Mr. Jenkins or Ms. Hahn is here asking something that's, some kind of a fluke or whatever. we have tried to look at this. We did talk to the board back in the CIP process about all this. And this is the reality if you want to operate your convenience centers the way we are now required to operate it. I mean, it's a simple fact.
That should have been planned when you decided to do it. So the county doesn't have unlimited money just to, so now we want a full-time driver. I mean, you know, I'm not saying that you don't need a full-time driver. I'm just saying, where's the money? Well,
Mr. Chairman, how about I offer a motion so we can entertain discussion?
I have a question for them. Are we getting out of our contract? I guess it was with local or something for hauling. Is that going to be? I was going to say, so they're backup. Okay.
So people at home cannot hear when someone says something from the audience. So can they repeat that at the?
So Jenkins, could you come on up there and?
Yes, when we go down, then local is our backup. Full. That's the only time he's used now.
All right, so they're just the backup for these two vehicles. Okay, thank you. If there's no more questions, do we have a motion?
I move to authorize the county administrator to transfer $14,432 from the general fund balance to the landfill budget and convert a part-time position to full-time.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion seconded. Discussion?
Mr. Chair, I have being the supervisor of the Perkins Corner area, especially during 2020, all of us on the board heard many complaints from our citizens that work on odd hours, and they use those convenience centers on the weekends to get rid of their trash and do their recycling. And as our constituents really look for those convenience centers to be able to utilize them as a benefit of being a King George resident, they can take their trash for free there to those landfills and convenience centers to be able to do that. And being open on the weekend is very important. And so those trucks are very important, especially at Perkins Corner, to remove them, to have an empty one put in those places. And I don't know, Mr. Jenkins, you had to close it a couple times because the things were too full and we couldn't remove them, correct?
That happened during the holidays.
Right, and I know, and then I get a phone call, and I know some of my other colleagues get a phone call. So I know for the Shiloh residents, it's very important that is a service that we give them. Thank you.
Mr. Granger? Mr. Collins?
So why not consider that for the next budget year instead of now when we don't have the money? It's a planning issue. You know, you should be planned for these things. We just don't have an unlimited supply.
I appreciate what you're saying, but during the last budget cycle, we did entertain the idea. I mean, we moved forward with purchasing the truck. So I'm not sure how much it could be used without the driver. And so we did also take into account the fact that there would be a request coming forth in the middle of the year. So it was planned.
So you
just was saying, hey, let's not do it for the whole year when we don't need it for the whole year. We'll do it when we need it. Trucks come in, is my understanding. So we need it. It's planned. I may not have been a part of it, but it was planned. And
I think that you should have planned for the driver at the time you made the expenditure for the truck. So that's all I have to say.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Uh, 0207 Department of Fire Rescue Emergency Services appointments, reappointments to the King George Local Emergency Planning Commission, the LEPC.
Mr. Chairman, this action item is to appoint and reappoint persons to the King George Local Emergency Planning Committee for a 2-year term. You've been provided a list of those individuals and also the organizations in which they represent. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. This is in pursuant to federal law under the Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act. We do have an active LEPC, and we do meet once a quarter. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Chief? Okay. I will read the list of appointments for the 22-24 LEPC. Jeff Stonehill, King George Board of Supervisors, Chief Steve Lynn, King George Emergency Management, Chief Dave Moody, King George Fire Rescue Fire Chief, Chief Dan Dixon, King George Fire Prevention, Monique Dina, Emergency Planner, LEPC Secretary, Julio Gomez from VDEM, Regional Planner, Craig Strotterman from VDEM Hazmat Office, Sheriff Giles, King George Sheriff's Office, Walter Legg, NSWC Dahlgren Division, Joseph Trocchio, U.S. Navy Dahlgren Environmental, and Pete Kistner from Waste Management. I have a motion.
I'll make a motion to appoint and reappoint these persons to the King George LEPC for a 2-year term. The new term begins February 1st, 2022.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thanks, Chief. Next up is 0208, letter in support of funding for Lake Caledon acquisition. So this is just a recap on what we spoke about at our TAC committee about the letters. I think the letters have all been sent to everybody to review. And I will read the letters quickly, I hope. This one is to Senator Janet Howell from the chair of the Finance and Appropriation Commission and Delegate Barry Knight, who's the chair of the Appropriations Committee. Dear Senator Howell and Delegate Knight, on behalf of King George County Supervisors, I am pleased to submit this letter of support from the county for Senate Bill 30, SB 30 for Budget Amendment C49.10 number 2 to provide $6.5 million in state funding for the Caledon State Park land acquisition. This initiative represented a tremendous opportunity for the Commonwealth not only to secure and preserve pristine wetlands, prime lands, and important ecosystem for future generations, but securing this property would also serve as a springboard to expand Caledon State Park. Caledon State Park is a treasure of King George and the entire Northern Neck. King George residents take great pride and enjoyment in the park's presence as a source of conservation and recreation. It has been well documented that the park is an attraction for outdoor-minded conservation and recreation enthusiasts from all over the state and the Mid-Atlantic region. Accordingly, the county fully supports efforts to expand upon the park's existing boundaries and thereby build upon the existing park amenities, such as proposed in Senator Richard Stewart's budget amendment. The acquisition of over 400 acres comprising of the Lake Caledon property by the state would open up additional lands for the Caledon Park experience by providing connectivity with the Dahlgren Railroad Heritage Trail. The addition of this property would create many more opportunities for camping, overnight accommodations, fishing, and the overall enjoyment of Caledon State Park. For these reasons, my sincere pleasure to submit this letter of support for the proposed acquisition. Thank you for your consideration. Please do not hesitate to contact me with any questions. And the next was going to be, gotta find that, is going to be a letter that's going to go to, Richard Stewart. Where did it go? Bear with me just a second. Do you have the new one?
Mr. Chairman, point of order, please. Could we take 2 minutes for a quick restroom break?
Sure. It'll take 2 minutes. I'll find this letter as well. Right, call this meeting back in session. And I apologize, there was a little bit of a confusion with two letters, but so that is the letter that's going to Richmond and to Senator Stewart and Delegate Knight and Senator Howell. And I know we did talk about it in the meeting the other day, and we did get some consensus, but just wanted a consensus of the whole board that, yes, we will go forward with this letter and send it down to Richmond.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So can I ask a follow-up question, Mr. Chairman?
Absolutely.
We didn't discuss this last week. I just wanted to see if there would be any interest in the board with regard to, because I know there was some confusion on the part of some constituents with regard to what the intention was for Senator Stewart's budget amendment, but there is the separate one for the suitability study that Delegate Torian introduced the amendment for. And that is not an acquisition. As Mr. Collins stated, it's separate and it's not for an acquisition, it's for a suitability study. So obviously we don't have anything ready to go on that tonight, but would there be consensus of the board to direct staff to draft a letter of support for the suitability study for Delegate Torian's budget amendment? Yes. Okay, thank you for entertaining that request, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Miller, if you guys can start working on that for a letter for that Delegate Torian, be great, thank you. Next is 2009, appointment to Rappahannock Community College Board.
I'd like to make a nomination to appoint Dr. Ann Bush to the Rappahannock Community College Board.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? No nays? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you. And moving on to County Administrator's report. Mr. Miller.
Okay, we're pulling that up. Okay, so first thing on there is, we had a joint meeting with the TAC. I think after the 15th, we should be in a position to have a joint meeting with the Service Authority Board. Opportunity to discuss a number of issues. I will tell you that the other one on there is a joint meeting that we're proposing to do with the EDA for a discussion on economic development strategic plan. And kind of like what we did with the TAC board, there's an economic development strategic plan that was prepared and adopted by the Board of Supervisors back in 2019. And so we want to come to you and provide updates on that plan. The next thing I wanted to talk about, I guess I skipped number 2, but number 2 is an action plan on the second industrial park. So if you remember, we had presented this. I know there's been some questions from some board members about this and what we would like to do. I want to put a package together that will outline kind of the process that would be, that would take place. My proposal would be that, we obviously run the gamut on this thing and that we do all the applications to VDOT. We do all the, whatever it takes to sell the land once we do all this. And it makes it a little bit easier because the county isn't necessarily involved in the same kind of a zoning process that, say, an individual applicant would have. And so I will be putting some stuff together on that and distributing that to you all. Public Information Officer, So it's obviously something that is a major source of conversation. We obviously had that with the TAC. I'm ready to move in that direction, but obviously concerns that Mr. Collins has expressed tonight, I think that perhaps the better course of action would be to perhaps give kind of an overview of what our current public information resources are and how they work and where our deficiencies are and where we may be needing to upgrade social media. And before we jump into hiring somebody, I need to obviously bring back a plan of action for that. And if it's going to be a new position, then that is money that would be something that you would have to make a decision on. But I think you need to have an assessment of where our deficiencies are. Clearly, we know that we have a lot of resources devoted to public information, but I don't know how effective we are at public information. I think that one of the things that was discussed tonight with the after action report for the winter storm was the need, the most primary essential need to make sure that your message is on point and that your unified approach, that was something that we wanted to make sure the entire time throughout the storm recovery, because we don't want a lot of information. It's been discussed that we had a situation at the Dahlgren wastewater plant. The most egregious thing that could happen would be if we were sending out multiple information that was not based on facts. And that's why there was a decision to wait to get all the facts to make sure that the report that was done was consistent with what we provided the Department of Environmental Quality. If we go around sending out information that isn't based on facts, that isn't somehow linked to something that could later be part of an investigation or part of a concern about the operations of a particular piece of infrastructure we have, then we are causing ourselves problems. So I think that what I'd like to do is bring back a plan which could entail, hiring somebody to look at this and to look at, how effective are we in our public information, and then be able to talk about this, in a more systematic way, so that we can answer the questions of where's the money going to come. We can answer those kind of things, and I think that that's something that I'll be bringing to you. The budget work sessions. So we are targeting the 22nd, which would be that off Tuesday, if that's okay. It's my understanding from Ms. Hahn that I believe you guys would meet on Wednesdays. This would be kind of the intro meeting. And then from there, we'll talk about, what days you want to meet. So that's kind of the target we have. And if that works, but if that doesn't, let us know. The next Tuesday, which in a leap year is the 29th of February, but it will be the first meeting in March. So you don't want to necessarily push that off. But if you want to do Wednesdays, that's fine. We can do that. I think I just targeted the 22nd. So right. So if that works, then we will schedule that in. If y'all want to tell us right now, maybe another day, like the 23rd or another time. It just all depends on how you guys want to do this. You make the call.
You can go early. Wednesday, if everyone can go. Normally we meet at 6:30.
Normally we meet at 6:30, but I'm fine with earlier if everyone else is amenable to earlier.
So the earliest I can get here is 4:30.
You want to do 5:30? Does that work for everybody?
I can do 4:30 if that works for y'all too. I'm just saying the earliest.
Yeah.
Yeah, the agenda meeting
Your
that,
agenda.
that Mr. Stonehill and I and Mr. Morris and I have is at 4. So we can, but we could, so 5:30?
Sure, 5:30 works. Perfect.
That's it. That's all I have. Oh. Oh, new hires. You're going to ask me to read that? Yes. No. There's a lot of new hires. No. We have 14. Okay, so we're going to try to pick up, yeah. Okay, there we go. First on the list, Mr. Collins, supervisor, is the new hire. Mr. Bailey, who is on the Board of Equalization, is a new hire. Deputy Sheriff Elliot Ganson. Fire and Rescue Matthew Lanston. Fire and Rescue Abigail Toller. Fire and Rescue Colton Nunez. And Fire and Rescue Seth Cleveland. We also have in the communication office for the sheriff, we have Michaela Del Coco, and we have Kelly Thompson. Bryce Young, who we'll get to another meeting, is our principal project inspector and principal engineer, working under Travis Cusenberry. Then we have Clara Lamoy with is a gym attendant with Parks and Recreation. We have Shamika Parker, is also a gym attendant, Parks and Recreation. Assistant gymnastic instructor is Magnolia Weaver. CWA Administrative Assistant Marissa Lowe. Transfers, Shayla Candelario is going to be a part-time employee. Susan Courtney is moved up to a full-time position from a part-time position. So they basically swap position. There's no money involved. And then do we have separations? I don't know if we have any. 0. So anyway, just try to give you a perspective of the folks that you now have working for you. And then those that may have changed, and then sometimes we have departures. So thank you.
Thank you. I had one other thing on my note for that is, we have anything more on the Dahlgren spill?
I'm sorry, wrong. Yes.
BDH.
So yes. So the board of directors of the Service Authority has been kept up to speed on where things are. We are in a critical situation at Dahlgren. There was a spill of clarified water that had contained certain contaminants, solids that had gone through the process once, and therefore there was other parts of the process that had to happen. It was not raw sewage, as I think my report indicated. I think that's one thing that's very important. When we have a requirement that whenever there is a incident at the wastewater plants, and in fact with our water service as well, when those things happen, we have to notify DEQ within 24 hours. We did notify them of the situation that happened. We then provide a 5-day action after action report, and we did all those things. We are working with DEQ on this, and so if you may remember, Mr. Weekly, when he left, we had hired a contract firm called Emboden Environmental to operate as our operator in charge, and their job is to provide a Class 1 operator, which is the highest level of operations for a wastewater plant. And they are on scene. I elevated their role from being an advisory technical support position to actually managing our wastewater plants at this point. It's an emergency situation. The board will be considering some actions going forward, but rest assured that we're working in conjunction with the DEQ, notifying them, keeping them all apprised, and we'll provide the information that's necessary. There are obviously situations that are sensitive and require that we keep things that are not necessarily that involve personnel that can't get out. And so we're investigating the situations. There will be some things that we'll have to work with the DEQ on going forward, but we're working to make sure that the Dahlgren wastewater plant is a strong functioning facility, but it's in a very critical situation. And I think that the board members who are a part of the service authority could attest to that if they desire, but they have been provided information. They're fully aware of the current situation.
Thank you. One last thing, just when we were talking about budgets and everything, Citizen Budget Advisory Committee people, I guess we need to see who wants to come do that again, because I know Miss Huber is, I spoke to her the other day, she's not interested in coming back. She has other commitments to do. So I guess we need to find new people and find out the folks, if any of them want to come back from last year or get some new ones. So, and that's all I have. If we are all done, we have a motion.
Move to adjourn until February 15th at 6:30 p.m. in the boardroom.
Second.
We have a motion, probably second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any noes, say no. Chair votes aye. Motion passes. We are adjourned.